What's up, people? Welcome to whatever week it is. It's Halloween week. That's all that matters. Yes, celebrate. Hallelujah. This is now. If you're watching this, when I post this, it's actually before Halloween because I'm posting this before Halloween weekend. Okay. In case you want to get ahead on it. And I am going to recommend this way. If you want to watch some of the films that I talk about before you do your little discussion post, you can. Others of you are watching this on Halloween, so happy Halloween. And some of you are watching this after Halloween. So I hope you enjoyed your Halloween festivities. Okay. If I was recording this on Halloween, you would see me as this guy right here. You'd see me with a beard, and a wig, a hair, and cool glasses, and you would see me with my electric guitar. Okay, because the effects of Jerry Garcia is so much better on electric guitar than acoustic, which acoustic's great. I love acoustic too. Okay, but if I'm going to be playing Grateful Dead songs, I would rather be doing it on electric guitar. Okay, that would be just during the day. At night, I'm doing a whole. We're gonna do a costume change, and Halloween night, my wife and I, who's blonde, we're going as Kurt and Courtney. Okay, from Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain. Hello. Okay, I got a blonde wig coming. Oh, it's gonna be awesome. Oh yeah, my wife's gonna get all trashed out. It's gonna be great. Okay, it's gonna be great. But this is not Halloween yet. I'm recording this days before Halloween in preparation for Halloween. Okay. So today I am going to go over Halloween films. So you can, if you want to spend the weekend having a Halloween movie marathon, I'm going to talk about these films today. Okay. And if you want to use any of these films for your discussion 5 post, do so. It'll be great. All right. This week you're picking a film to watch. You're analyzing that film, and then you're writing discussion 5. Okay. And then next week is when we're going to start doing essays. Work on your essay 3. You need to have finished reading a book by then. This novel that you're supposed to have read cannot be a standard high school novel. I know a lot of you are dual enrollment students, okay? You cannot be writing this college paper on The Great Gatsby or Of Mice and Men, or The Odyssey or To Kill a Mockingbird or any of those books they teach in high school. And since I'm a high school teacher, I know what books those are, okay? So if you try to submit a paper that is, about one of those books, it's about Frankenstein or Dracula, I'm gonna say no, no. Okay, it has to be a book that is not a standard high school book, so that way I know that you read it for this class this semester. Okay. All right, let's get into analysis. You're supposed to. I wanted you to have watched Candyman, but I understand if you couldn't. I wanted you to at least have read the article about the demon of racial history. All right, and maybe listen to the podcast that I posted on Blackboard. Read the article about horror films in general. Okay, prior to this. So here we go. What we're doing here with this is the same thing you're going to be doing for discussion 5. And it's pretty much the same thing you'll be doing for your novel. But for your novel, you'll be writing about the book rather than a film. But it's the same thing. Film analysis and the novel analysis are the same. So the important things I'm doing here is not so much for you to understand horror films better, but for you to understand how we analyze a piece of art to pull out some sort of theme or a message, all right, and through symbolism and things that we see. Okay, so it's the process that's the same, even though the topics are different. But you might have read a horror novel, you might have read a Stephen King book or something, okay, or Clive Barker, and this could help you as well because the same thing we're doing with these horror films, you could have done with your horror novel. Candyman and the horrors of racism. So the opening credits, we have this transition. It's a very early form of technology of getting this overshots. Today we would use drones, but when this was made in '92, they didn't really have drones. Okay, so the shot is very technical. But what's cool about it is it shows this sense of traveling. We're going from one part of the city to another part of the city, and this opening sequence represents the transition between the two different worlds that take place in this film: the white community and the black community. All right, this is a film that utilizes um, uh, the horror genre and techniques to make a statement about racism, okay, and the effects of racism. And so it begins just right here in the opening scene where we have this sequence of moving from one part of the city to the other part of the city, which we have the white elite ivory tower of the university, and then we're going to have the impoverished area of Chicago where Cabrini Green, the public housing unit, is. Okay, we have a lot of symbolisms of bees in this film. Okay, there's a lot of bee action going on. And so we have individual bees, and then we have like that beehive, the beehive itself, which the bees symbolize the collective force of racism. Individually, each bee is weak, but as a hive, they have power. Okay, a individual white person's racist ideas might just seem, non-effective, but when a bunch of racists come together, they can impact a lot. Okay, and so Candyman is a product of this racism. He was murdered out of racism just because he had a relationship with a white woman. Okay, and they killed him. The white people did. And so the very beginning of the scene where you have the city of Chicago and you have all the bees there. Okay, that's symbolically representing of the systemic racism that takes place in white communities. All right, all those bees, those busy bees, are white. The collective idea of white power, white people, and these big economical centers, these like cities, these are representative of the beehive, where these powerful white people are collected. The power of the hive is in the white colony, represented in the upper class community of Chicago. So the major theme: the destructive effects of racism on Black society. Okay, and Candyman is a product of that. We have Helen. Okay, we have this beehive city scene. All right, and then Helen's face starts to evolve out of it, and then we have this shot of her. Okay, she she, she fades in. So then there she is. Okay, so she is the white woman, and she's a well-meaning racist. She doesn't know that she's racist. That's part of the theme of the film. This doesn't address, like, Candyman himself address uh, anti-racist kind of people. I'm sorry, racist people, anti-black people who want to kill black people just because of their skin. Okay, but Helen represents the other kind of racist, the well-meaning racist, the racist who wouldn't consider herself to be racist verbally, but she still holds racist ideas. So while not a KKK member, while not part of a white mob that would go in and kill Candyman, she still lives apart from the black community. She sees them as ignorant. She sees them as gullible. She sees them only useful for her own needs. And she ends up causing more problems than solutions for them, which we'll get into. Okay. So while she's not an outwardly hateful racist, she's a patronizing racist. She still does not see the black people in this film as equal to her, but not in a "I'm so superior." It's more like, "Oh, poor you kind of way. It's patronizing. One major theme in this, symbol for the theme, is the housing. We have Helen's apartment complex, and then we have Cabrini Green, which is where this is situated as public housing in the black community and where Candyman haunts. Okay. And Helen's and Cabrini Green were made by the same architect. This is discussed in the film. It's the same architect, which represents much of the whole separate but equal, but really not equal policies in segregated America. America for a long time had this whole separate but equal, but everyone knows from history they weren't equal at all. They were very unequal. And these buildings represent that. They symbolize that. Helen's and Cabrini Green. Same buildings made by the same architects, but vastly different. Okay. America wants to present this idea of the unconstitutional policy of segregation. The court struck down segregation, so then we started declaring, oh, we are desegregated, but really we never were. Okay. There's like redlining. In the United States, redlining is a discriminatory practice in which services are withheld from neighborhoods that have significant numbers of racial and ethnic minorities and low income residents. Okay, we see this with the public use of land. Freeways were used to segregate neighborhoods. Construction of highways are largely free to ignore environmental, historical, social, or other factors, allowing them to focus on the most direct route from one point to another. But more often than not, that meant routing those freeways through black neighborhoods where land was cheap and political opposition was low. Okay, created natural divides between white and upper class neighborhoods and racial, ethnic, low income communities. I'm gonna pause. This book, The Color of Law, is about this, about how the legal system was used to limit Black people's colored people's access to power and rights and stuff in America legally, and how redlining in neighborhoods were created in order to still keep Black people apart from white people and access to power and stuff, and how a lot of Black people's properties were confiscated through the idea of eminent domain. I'm reading this book and listening to the book called Asada, an autobiography, and it's about this former Black Panther. And I came across this passage just yesterday about how her family had they had a family farm. She grew up on this beach. They had beachfront property. Her grandparents had a nice business there. They had they had what we call a colored beach. So the only beaches that allowed people of color to go there. Her grandparents had a little restaurant and rentals and all this stuff for Black people, because Black people couldn't go to public beaches in the 60s, in the 50s. And so she writes this. She says, "For me, the beach was a wonderful place. And to this day, there's no place on this earth that I love more. I've never seen a beach more beautiful than it was then. Before they decided to build a canal right through the property of my grandparents. It is now just a pale shadow of what it used to be. Most of it destroyed. The government chose the only black beach in North Carolina to build their canal through. Okay. And so that is what happens to so much of Black property. Is freeways, canals, all these things get put up through it. So, just these two buildings represent this whole idea of two buildings, two places, two communities, separated, but clearly not equal at all. Bullshit. Okay, the film also discusses microaggressions. Okay, microaggressions are words and actions that indirectly or subconsciously communicates one's discriminative beliefs. Okay, so you might ask someone, "Are you a racist?" And they'll say, "No, I'm not a racist at all." But then later on, they might say things like, Obama just seemed, I voted for him because he was just so different. He just wasn't like, he just sounds so smart. He sounded so smart. And these are clearly, even Obama wrote about this in his book, that like people would say these things to him, like, I forget that you're black. 'Cause, God, you're so smart. And these are microaggressions, little things that people say that reveal their discriminative beliefs. Okay. And so, like Helen, she doesn't take any of the black women seriously. She listens to the maid stories about the myths of Candyman, but she doesn't really believe that's true. Her best friend keeps telling her things like, you need to be careful. We should not go down here. This place is dangerous. And Helen ignores all of it to the point where Helen ends up getting assaulted um, and getting her face all jacked up, okay? Because she was not listening to her friend. And she doesn't believe them. She thinks she knows better. She doesn't really believe in the whole Candyman myth. She's just collecting folklore. Okay, she's studying it not because she believes it though, but because of she finds it fascinating that other people believe it. She ends up causing more problems than solutions. She ratted on the guy who claimed to be Candyman, who attacked her. And this boy's like, dude, you just got me in tons of trouble. You know the saying, snitches end up in ditches, okay? And this guy was not caught for a long time because nobody ratted on him. And now that she has, he feels threatened. And then this lady, once Helen entered her life and interviewing her about Candyman and the instances that happened at Cabrini Green, okay? I mean, her dog ends up being murdered, her baby is kidnapped, and so Helen brings in Helen's own pursuit of her own wants and desires, she causes more problems for everyone else. I mean, her poor friend ends up dying because of it. Mirrors. There's a lot of mirrors in the film. We always see Helen looking in the mirror, and she's always being reflected in the mirror. Okay, and this is because so much of what she sees in other people is herself. How will they benefit her? Okay, she sees people as just tools for her to use. She doesn't see them in their own, like these women. She didn't see them for their own needs and their own beliefs. She didn't believe them that way. Okay, she only just saw how she could use them, how she could use her, how she could use her, how she could use him, how she could use her. And so it's like she's really just always looking in the mirror. How would this benefit me? But also, though, the mirror also refers to her need to look within herself and acknowledge her own cognitive bias. All right, her own subconscious racism, her own subconscious superiority. She needs to have a gut check. She needs to really see what she's doing to these people and the way that her attitude and her treatment and the way she thinks of them is negatively impacting them. Okay. And so this is kind of this focus on like, white people need to like look at themselves and really see what they're doing. All right, so that's basically about Candyman itself, the film. All right. Now, some other films that have things to deal with the horrors of society. These are some films that you could watch also this weekend. You can have a horror movie marathon if you wanted to, okay? If you're not sure what film to watch for your Discussion 5 post, you can watch one of these that I'm about to talk about, okay? I'm going to go kind of quick. I have about 5 minutes before the bell rings. Here we go. The other horrors of society, okay? So horror movies shows what we fear. That's why the best horror movies are almost always pulling double duty, serving up scares that also illuminate the anxieties that lie below the surface of our collective cultural norms. All right, so the film Get Out. Oh, I need to fix that. Okay, Get Out. It's a good movie. It's contemporary. It's made 2017. It deals with race also, but unlike Candyman, which addresses the negative effects of racism, Get Out addresses the effects of cultural appropriation. Okay, Candyman looks at what happens when we show hatred towards the black community, when we ignore them, we neglect them, we don't believe in them, we don't respect them, all those things. Okay. Get Out is to the point where the complete opposite, cultural appropriation, where the negative impacts when you like a culture or group so much that you want to take them over. So, like cultural appropriation, the inappropriate or unacknowledged adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture or identity. This can be controversial when members of a dominant culture, white people, appropriate from minority cultures. White people literally taking over black bodies. That's what this movie's about. Is that taking black people, cutting their brains out, and putting a white person's brain in the black person's body. Okay? Because black is cool. Black is cool. Jay-Z is cool. Beyonce, Queen Bee is cool. Okay? And so white people want that coolness so much. And black men are stronger than white men. So if I want to be really, really strong, I'm going to take Julio Jones's brain out of his head and put my brain in his head, and I can be tall, I can be athletic, can have now bad hamstrings, okay, and I can be better than this, okay. So Get Out, it satirizes and horrifies cultural appropriation, okay. Midsummer, 2018, oof, great film, okay. This is it's sort of a feminist, I guess you can consider a feminist film, okay. Scathing takedown of masculinity and abusive relationships played out in the form of a horror movie. This is about pretty much how so many boyfriends suck. Men are awful partners to women, and that like women can really find the most comfort and acceptance through other women, and not necessarily even be like lesbians, but like just like friendships. The male best friends to this girl's boyfriend in this film represent toxic men who just want to hang out and be left alone, unbothered by the emotional needs of women. They're standoffish and hesitant toward women. The male character's aloofness is the source of his villainy. It is also his fatal flaw, his undoing. He cannot be a supportive partner to Danny, this girl. He thus becomes the villain. This movie is It's crazy. My wife doesn't like horror movies, but she read about this film and she was like, "Oh man, I want to watch this film so bad." So she was like, "You watch it and tell me about it." And I was like, "Cool." So I watched it and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy, but yeah, it's about toxic men and their doom is coming, and how women are better partners to each other ultimately than men are. The Lost Boys. Great film. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's great. Okay. The Lost Boys. Let's see if I can move this. Oh, no, no, no. Exit drawing. Exit. The Lost Boys symbolizes what it's like to struggle with our sexual identity for the first time in our lives. Michael, who's this guy? Michael becomes seduced by David to join the Lost Boys. David successfully entices Michael to become one of them when Michael drinks from David's bottle upon his request. A bottle filled with David's blood that would trigger Michael's transformation into a vampire. It's a classic vampire film. The exchange of blood has also commonly been used in vampire films as a means by which to present the AIDS epidemic that affected so many queer people in the 80s. When the gang is hanging from a bridge, David urges Michael to just let go and accept that he is one of them. And he does, plummeting from the bridge into the night as a completely new kind of man. This should kind of remind you of Sea Change, when he's like, the guy sitting at the bar, he's like, I'm a new person, I'm a new man, and he accepts his homosexuality. It's very similar also. David is trying to get Michael to accept his homosexuality and join the Lost Boys. So the film's director, Joel Schumacher, is an openly gay man. Therefore, the film is regarded as a positive horror portrayal of discovering one's sexual identity. Okay, it's fun. It's silly. It's a play on it. All right, it's enticing. All right, it's good to have gay villains as well as gay protagonists. But at the same time, though, the film also opens itself up to a homophobic interpretation, saying as in like, oh, it can be seen as heterosexism, promoting heterosexuals. That like if you're a homosexual, you are a killer. You're this bloodthirsty, horny male who is passing blood and AIDS around. Okay. And so if you want to be safe, then you need to be straight. That's a negative interpretation of it. Now, that's not what Joel Schumacher, the director, intended. He wanted to see it as in, gay representation. All right, there's representation out there. We like horror films; they're fun. Okay, let's have one that plays around with these ideas and toes the line of it. All right, because he, as a gay man, never saw enough gay male representation in film growing up. Okay, which is a valid argument. But at the same time, it can also be negatively interpreted, which, any art you put out there, you are opening yourself up for that possibility. The Lost Boys deals with sexual identity. Fun times. And then finally, we have the last one is The House on the Left. Okay, let me just get rid of myself. The House on the Left from 1972. It's by Wes Craven, creator of, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream. This is a morality play in the form of a revenge slasher film. Morality plays were plays that were put during the 14, 15, 1600s that taught moral lessons. The main character always ended up failing, falling, and we the audience, were supposed to learn from the mistakes of the main character. And so this is a morality play, but in the form of a very brutally violent film. It's very violent. It's very disturbing. At a time when blockbusters were romanticizing murder, Craven, the director and writer of the film, wanted to show simply and crudely that violence corrupts. Wes Craven protested the Vietnam War and set out to make a film that was direct with its audience about the impact of violence. There was no catharsis or titillation, just bleak brutality. This is a film about two teenage girls who get brutally murdered by three psychos. And then those three psychos end up going to the house seeking shelter from a terrible storm of one of the victims that they killed. The two parents, realizing that their daughter has been murdered, and then realizing that the three people in their house are the ones who murdered her, they set out to then get revenge, and they one by one kill three people brutally. Okay, but at no point do you feel satisfied at the very end that like justice was served. Okay, and so in the final scene, the parents, having killed their daughter's murderer, slumped down in a pose of defeat because they had become what they hated most. They realized that they didn't honor their daughter's memory. They actually imitated the murderers. So they were more closely related to the murderers than the daughter. So it's an anti-violence film, which is ironic because it's so violent. But at no point does it promote this violence. At no point should the audience be like, yeah, get them, Instead, we should feel as deprived as the parents and feel as morbid, okay, and because of the brutality, than supporting it, okay. So, in a very violent, disturbing film, it actually has a very anti-violent and message, okay, that we should not be engaging in such brutality, either the Vietnam War or through revenge. Okay, so those are some films that you could watch. Those are films that we are covering. So I hope you understand. I hope you enjoyed that. Uh, take a a watch of some film and post on the discussion board. If you have any questions, then let me know. All right, I'll see y'all later. Okay, bye bye.